compliant, seeing through the CFO lens. Now, this is going to be heavy duty because the big experts are going to do the talk, walk the talk. I'll be inviting on the stage Somain Ray, the Chief Financial Officer from Bajaj Auto. Up next, also in this Trialogue. Now, this word in itself is very interesting, and I'm just gushing over it. We'll also have with us Gaurav Sheth, the Chief Financial Officer, Airtel Payments Bank. Mr. Seth, we'll be happy to welcome you. Well, the session chair, if I talk about, is all suited up, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Ankur Jain, the Partner Risk Assurance PwC India, is all set to take over, so I must leave the main screen. Over to you, Ankur.
Thank you, Shikha. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ankur. I'm a partner with Pricewaterhouse. I lead the legal regulatory compliance practice for the firm. In my role, I often spend time with the CEOs, CFOs, the board of directors, chief risk officers, and compliance officers, helping them navigate the complex world of legal and regulatory requirements and how can they create effective compliance programs. Well, in that context, I'm often reminded of this one instance which I wanted to narrate to you. We were in this meeting with the CFO and the executive team of a very large Indian conglomerate and deliberating around how the business environment is fast changing and how are new compliance and regulatory risks emerging and what could be effective ways of managing it. And I distinctly remember that in between the meeting, the CFO kind of stood up and said that, look, Ankur, to me, compliance is more like a mindset. Compliance is a matter of mindset. I don't think 100% compliance is possible in the practical way. And every time I reflect upon it, I reflect upon this comment. I just wonder. On one side is these practical nuances and challenges, which probably the CFO was referring to. And on the other hand is the huge onerous responsibilities that the regulatory framework puts on us, right? The Companies Act, as you know, requires the board of directors to include in the responsibility statement a specific certification that their organizations are not only compliant, but also have robust systems operating all the time to ensure that compliance. The LODR puts a specific responsibility on the CEO and the CFO to certify on compliance management, and so does many other regulations. So the question is really, how do we bridge the gap between the practical challenges and the regulatory ask of being compliant? And is there anything more to it? Is this compliance only about risk management? Preventing the penalties of non-compliance, or is there more to it? So with that context, I must invite Somain and Gaurav. Both bring an extreme amount of experience in their roles as CFOs for the organizations that they lead. And more importantly, they represent two very different segments of the industry in that sense. So I would request them to share their perspective on what is it about being compliant and how do we create those effective compliance management systems. So Somain, with that, maybe I'll start with you. And compliance is, Somain, such a broad term. It could mean your internal policy compliances. It could mean statutory regulatory compliances, as we've been talking about. It could mean ethical compliances, code of conduct. It could mean a lot of things. But what's your perspective, Somain, on your industry in particular? What are those key emerging concern areas that you would want to talk about today?
Okay, so thanks, Ankur. I think what is important is when we speak about compliance as a CFO, I'll be candid. The first thing that comes to your mind is, has the TDS been paid on time? The returns been filed, or has the PF challans been deposited? And I'm no different. I also started from there. So statutory compliance checklist meant that. I think compliance has a little larger term, and with ESG becoming popular and multiple other things, compliance is the way you would like to do your business. In one of the organizations that I used to work, but they used to say that if you have a doubt about doing something in a particular way, think if it comes on the headlines of Washington Post or in India, in Times of India, will you be ashamed? If you are, then don't do it. I think compliance has been made into something of a follow the rule. As has been discussed in some other forums also earlier, compliance is both about following the way things has to be done, yet create competitive opportunities by finding out those nuances. For example, instead of thinking about compliance being filing your TDS return, if you think about compliance as to what do you need to comply to get an incentive from a certain industrial development corporation, the meaning of compliance changes. So I think compliance should be looked at as something which is how things should be done, not necessarily only to follow rules, but also to create competitive opportunities.
Yeah. No, thanks, Somain. And Gaurav, that's an interesting thought. Just picking up from there, and you come from a very regulated sector. So what are some of the emerging risks, Gaurav, that you think are hogging the headlines and kind of keep you or a professional like yourself awake on this topic?
Thanks, Ankur. And the points that Somain made were extremely interesting, because there was a time when risks for a CFO were limited, as Somain mentioned, taxation, complying with various statutes. And if I was to talk about financial institutions, it was AML. That was the mother of all. I mean, if you are AML compliant, I think that's good enough for you. Now, the risk landscape, if I was to say, over the last few years, has evolved massively. It has gone more deeper. It has gone more wider. And as we sit today, and as we say the world is connected and therefore hence more digital, issues like data privacy came up in the forefront. So a couple of years back, data privacy started coming in, and it is right there up front right now. Then over the last 12 months, as the COVID period, this sector, and especially when I talk of the financial sector, this has gone through a complete shake-up. So if I was to talk about Demon, just to compare, Demon was a short-term impact. COVID, as we see today, is an extremely long-term impact. In fact, digital has become the mode of transactions today for across all segments of customers. The digital customers have multiplied, and therefore along with it, and things like cyber risks, which earlier were considered only for a select few people who were doing digital transactions, now it is applicable across. And if I was to actually talk of the newer age frauds, the world actually moved away from, we used to hear about card cloning, now we are hearing about finger cloning, the fingerprint cloning. I think that's where the world has moved to. And therefore, these are real risks. If we were to talk about emerging risks, the real risks today are cyber risks, are data privacy, are fingerprint cloning. All of these risks are here to stay. And therefore, what it means is that we need to move very fast, and we need to completely monitor them and provide solutions. Now, for a moment, let's talk about a bank. A customer, whether an individual customer or a B2B customer, he feels safe only till the point of time there is no breach in the security issues. And therefore, as a CFO, we must be ready, in my mind, to draw chunky portions of our annual budgets to ensure that the organization is well equipped to address to all of these rising risks that we are seeing today. So that's my view on the emerging risks and how, as a CFO, we should be contributing.
Yeah. No, Gaurav, absolutely. And you kind of linked it nicely to my next question, which is, of course, Somain, it's such a wide spectrum as we spoke about. Gaurav was also pointing out to data privacy, cybersecurity, and many other emerging risk areas. What is really, in your mind, the role of a CFO in terms of, building effective compliance programs in their organizations. Where should they focus? I know the CFO controls the budgets, definitely, which are required for investment. You brought a perspective that compliances can be a matter of competitive advantage. Can you throw some more light and experiences around this?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I think as CFOs, what we need to do is there are two separate buckets, which has come to merge, or three. So there is a compliance bucket. Typically, we CFOs and call it statutory compliance. There is a risk management framework. So risk mitigation, risk management, as listed companies are supposed to do that. You have a risk management committee, and that risk covers all sorts of risk. Could be business risk, could be financial risk, legal risk.
Yeah.
And then there is this whole insurance was supposed to only do, let's say, property insurance and mediclaim for everybody and all that shit. I think these three buckets has to come first together. Non-compliance leads to risk, and there are places where you cannot comply. For example, yesterday, PF department at about 6 a.m. allowed that you can pay to the RPFO monies without linking Aadhaar and UAN. Otherwise, every company on this country who submits it to PFA, everybody would have been statutorily non-compliant. Technically, I think everybody is, because most of them didn't realize it yesterday and made the payment today. And it should have been done yesterday. So that is statutory. Leads to risk. And when it comes to risk, you look at business risk, a very important point that Gaurav raised. In B2B business, there is a lot of, for example, if I was talking to TCS for doing a certain IT project across multiple locations, I would know that they follow certain ethics and practices, which gives me the comfort to associate with them. Now, TCS spends money to ensure that compliance happens, and they have created that brand aura that, I'm comfortable working with them. I know people will be paid. I know, for example, one of the critical things about confidentiality clauses, I would be sharing my business data with them. They would be giving it to third parties, but they would have back-to-back confidentiality clauses. So it is very important that that comes into the compliance. And third is this whole insurance bit. I think, and I could be wrong, and Gaurav comes from insurance background, so I'm taking a bit of liberty in front of him. Asset insurance, we all understand like the back of our hand. My sense is liability insurance, none of us understand. If I have tried to understand from multiple stalwarts, how do I quantify DLO sum assured or cyber security sum assured? I've not been able to. So what we do is we all look at each other. Acha, this company has done so much, this company has done so much, so I will do so much. There is no logic, which tells us that this is a very unknown, uncharted territory. And hence, coming back to your question, Ankur, I digressed a bit. We have to bring these three things together and explain it to the organization that it is not about ticking a box. There are manifold implications of this. Embed it into the people who do. The final signing is the CEO and the CFO, but that's different. Every person should look at his or her area with this lens that the way I'm doing it, do I think I can do it better, or do I think there's a risk either of compliance or of business or other things? Once you start thinking this way, and I know this answer will not satisfy the doubts that will come obviously listening to it, but I think this is where we are starting. And I don't think too many organizations are way beyond this at this point in time.
Yeah. No, I think very nicely put, move beyond tick in the box and a checklist type compliance program and bring compliance risk and risk management or insurance management kind of all into a similar bucket. Gaurav, in your sector, even designing a compliance program is regulated, let me put it that way. So anything that you want to share?
So I'll just add on to what Suman was saying, because there was a very interesting point that he made, especially on the fact that compliance cannot be a one-man's job. And there was a point in time when, if you all recollect, sales used to be the problem of the sales team, profits used to be the problem of the finance team. And that's how organizations used to work in the past. Now, if an organization has to be successful, both these teams have to be joined at the hip. Similarly, when we talk of compliance, compliance cannot be a single man's job. It cannot be the job of the compliance team and the risk team. It has to be embedded into each and every person's KRA. That's how stringent, and stringent is a very strong word, but I'm using that word. That's how stringent compliance culture should be. Now, when you talk of a CFO, see, the CFO's role has evolved over years, and therefore now we are in a situation where the CFOs actually are an important part of the strategies of the organization. And compliance is an important strategy of the organization. Because if the compliance culture is missing, there will be repercussions for the organization, not just in the long term, but maybe in the short term, as in a PF miss can result in some statute fines. Or, as Somen mentioned, especially for me, when I do a lot of B2B business, if my customers were to find out that there are non-compliances that are happening, forget B2B, even a B2C customer, if he was to find out that there are non-compliances happening in my bank, he would be extremely uncomfortable in putting the monies in. And therefore, organizations and CFOs have to ensure that they are well invested into tools, processes, and people to ensure that compliance is like a part of the life. So in my view, the CFO plays an extremely crucial role of ensuring that balance exists in the organization between business and compliance. So that would be mine.
No, absolutely. And I'm finding this perspective of, looking at compliances more than risk management to kind of making it into a competitive advantage or a business advantage very refreshing. And Gaurav, to your point of embedding compliances, in different people's role from that point of view and in our day-to-day activities, I think that brings us to the point that technology and data can play a significant role in terms of doing this, right? So if I can request both, Somen, again, starting with you first, any specific use cases where you've seen technology and data kind of, actually helping in effective compliance management? We at PwC have been professing that, look, your compliance mechanisms need to be more predictive, preventive in that sense. So any use cases, Somen, that you want to share?
So before I get into use cases, Ankur, I would like to draw your attention to a particular point. See, we are talking about compliance to statutes or rules. Please understand that today statutes are being written with the impression that technology will be used to comply. I mean, today the whole GST architecture, the 26 AS, everything is being designed by the rule makers that technology will be used to check. So you today don't have a choice. If you are keeping your khata book like it used to be, you will have to still put it into some kind of a software. So I think in compliance, using digital means, for a lack of a better word, a computer is now, you have to. But what is the next step? I think what we have been able to do is, one, obviously all of us, and there are dime a dozen, very good, I shouldn't say dime a dozen, there is a lot of compliance tools which gives you a list of compliances that you should do and all that. And let's say you take that compliance tool and you send it to the user will forward it to the HR head and say, give me 3 people. So what is very important is, take a tool, classify your risks. See, you cannot do everything. In life, nothing. So you classify what, according to your organization, what are the non-negotiables? For example, I mean, please don't laugh. If you read the Factories Act, it says how many spittoons have to be there as percentage of number of workers. Now, this may not be the most important compliance that you need to do. So, classify the risks, decide the periodicity, and most important, there should be no single person who is responsible to mention compliance. As Gaurav rightly said, I wish I could push it all the way till KRA, but maybe we will not be able to do that with the CEOs. But there should be a person who's identified. So in Bajaj Auto, what we have done is, we've got a lot of small offices, about 21 of them across the country, where the team is very small, some sales guy, one finance guy, no admin, nothing. So we have created a method by which it is easy for them. And there are certain compliances which has moved to a department which earlier was never thought of. For example, lift maintenance. Now, lift license has been renewed or not. How will that sales manager tell you? He's like, I come by the lift and go down. That's all I know. If it doesn't work, I'll complain. But license expire, I don't know. So it is very important that you classify them, identify the right Spock, and put that responsibility on that Johnny. The biggest problem of compliance has been, it has typically been kept with the finance head of the unit. And that finance head gets frustrated because he has to run behind people with a sheet of paper. Okay, please tell me, please tell me. Once you classify, first of all, the periodicity and the recurrence comes down. The relevant one comes up. So whom you are talking to, he or she also says, this one is important. You're not talking everything. And then identify that right person. So we have been able to do that. It took us about, very sad to say, it took us about a year, which was very sloppy. But today, I'm very confident that there are 30 items which I don't check. And if the government has to put a fine, I will pay, because the fine is less than 500 rupees with no imprisonment. So that is how you can manage.
Okay, good. Now, so Gaurav, Somen spoke about an enterprise-wide compliance framework and a system, which kind of classifies. I think, again, coming back to you, there are very transactional compliances in your business, right? Every transaction has to go through a set of controls and regulations. Any other use cases, Gaurav, that you want to talk about?
If I was said, I'll pick up two examples of use cases. Both of them are more business facing, but then at the end of the day, it's about saying, if I am not compliant, business will not come in, and hence the whole story of the P&L. So I'll not go there. But two use cases. One is, now, as a bank, we today have more than 5 lakh banking points. Now think about a scenario where, and each of these banking points are transacting with the customers. Each of these banking points, therefore, carry a financial and reputational risk for the bank. Now, monitoring them physically is an impossible task.
Yep.
And therefore, what we did was we developed technologies, using lat long and so on and so forth, to ensure that right from the point of onboarding a customer to every transaction that a customer is doing, everything is monitored.
Mm-hmm.
There are real-time alerts. And in case there are risk threats that are being perceived, we actually go ahead and block the banking point to ensure that there is no non-compliance that is happening at any point of time. So there are preventive measures, there are preventive techniques that we are using there. Similarly, when I look at this, we a few months back, we launched a product using telecom network intelligence, which actually sends alerts to mobile numbers of the customers. Now, what this does is, this helps in reducing unauthorized transaction risk. Now, while the customer is benefited from this, however, what we've seen is that the bank's risks also start getting reduced. And every time a risk is reduced, I look at every risk as a cost. There is a cost saving to for the bank, and therefore it helps the bank save costs, which in turn actually is going in and improving my P&L. So that's how. And besides, obviously, the various statute compliances that Somen talked about, I completely agree. As in, there'll be a few compliances which we'll always go ahead and comply with. There'll be a few which will miss, but then that's okay. You need to move on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, again, taking a cue from what both of you said, the regulatory environment and the business environment, both are so dynamic, which makes compliance almost like a journey, right? At any point of time, I think it would be very difficult to say that now I am fully there, right? So, I realize we are coming towards the end of this, but quickly, Somen and Gaurav, again in that same order, one or two advisors for your colleagues, right? Who are going to make investment, this technology and data doesn't come easy, right? There is an investment required there. So any advice based on your doing this in your own organizations that they should keep in mind?
So Gaurav will have far more detailed answer to this one because his compliances are 3 times mine. But I'll tell you, go for something very modular and invest a lot of time when you are rolling it out or configuring it. So first, ensure that you have thought through who will do what. That is the first and the most important thing. Driven by technology, obviously. The second is tying up with someone, and I don't think it can be done internally, tying up with someone like let's say PwC or whoever, where updates will be patched. Because the biggest issue is it cannot be static. It has to be modular. Updates has to get patched with alerts to people. For example, if somebody was writing in a blue ink and now the government says you have to write with red, the damn guy needs to know. He cannot come to know at the end of the month that I had to write it with red. So update, patching up with alerts and modular, and spend a lot of time upfront, disproportionate time, so that later on you don't need to spend more time. At the same moment, I must tell you, there is a big problem of compliances for organizations who operate trans-globe. There is a huge lack of availability of a consolidated compliance tool for the world. I have been looking for one for 2 years. The closest is something which Bloomberg has, but it doesn't say what you have to do. It just says there is a change in rule. So, we operate across 79 countries, directly or indirectly. So this is something which is a need. India is going global. So it is very important that organizations like PwC and others come up with, and they have got the global mind. They know what is happening in India, Argentina, everywhere. They should come up with this customized tool where we can do compliance centrally across the world. But otherwise, modular, spend more time to get it right first time, and patch updates and alerts.
Thanks, Somen. Gaurav, quickly.
I think Somen has covered it brilliantly, because I think it's all about the workflow. You have to ensure that the tool is you spend, as you mentioned, inordinate time in designing. If you do it well, then I think all of it is taken care of. The other one, and while he mentioned it, I want to repeat it. The one large risk that I've seen is static data. Now, statutes, laws, regulations, they at times change overnight. And therefore, the tool has to be robust to capture everything. One more thing that I'll probably add in is we need to clearly identify one key spoke, one key responsible person for every activity. Because if you were to say such and such function is responsible, then there is no one responsible. And therefore, there needs to be an identified spoke. Lastly, I would say we need to invest inordinate amount of money into technology for doing compliance. I've always maintained a compliance delaying business is better than trying to take in business which is non-compliant. It's absolutely fine to lose business as well. A non-compliant business is absolutely fine to lose because it will give you a short-term gain but a huge long-term pain. And therefore, for me, compliance is something which has to be right up there. Spend the money, spend the budgets, do it well, and then only you go ahead and sort of try to either launch an organization or launch a new product.
I think, Ankur, I know we're out of time, but I would like to reiterate the last point which Gaurav said. I think that is possibly the most important point in this session. I told you about this whole liability insurance. I was indirectly mentioning it. I did not want to, but Gaurav put it bang on. We do not know the cost of non-compliance. So please do not comply. If you know the cost of non-compliance, 2,000 rupees fine, that's fine. But there are a lot of places where we do not know the cost of non-compliance. I'll give you an example. if you today export to a certain country which is banned by US, US may tell all bankers not to give you US dollars. So the point that I'm trying to say is that sometimes we don't understand the impact of non-compliance.
Yeah.
It is best, when in doubt, please shout. Don't do anything which is non-compliant, according to you.
Now, awesome. Guys, we are out of time, but I hope you find this discussion useful. I always find both of these gentlemen very interesting in terms of their, and very candid in terms of their sharing of perspectives. So thank you, both of you. I think two broad takeaways. One, as both Somen and Gaurav said, technology can play a significant role and will continue to play a significant role in keeping us honest, being compliant, and on top of the compliance risk. But equally more important is that let's not look at compliance as just the cost part of it, right? There's a huge business advantage, competitive advantage. And as Sumin said, and Gaurav also mentioned, like if you are in doubt, if you don't know really the cost of non-compliance, please don't venture in that space. I at least now know of 2 CFOs whose purse strings are open for compliance initiatives. I hope you guys are able to drive a similar conversation in your organization. So thanks a ton. Thank you, Sumen and Gaurav, once again. Passing it back to Shikha. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankur. And I think you just summed it up perfectly, said the just right thank yous with such a warm smile. I need to say nothing else except a big thank you to the trio for being firstly so involved in the discussion now hence it felt very relatable and of course informative as you spoke. So thank you for extracting for us what's on the other side of your lenses. So thank you. And with that, dear delegates, before I lead you all into the last leg of our FinCon day, may I invite all of you to visit and duly visit, check out and experience the booth of Cloudera Automation Anywhere and Tenable. So you will also see a feedback form at the respective booths. Make sure you fill in those, and this is all present at the experience zone. So that is for your information. I'll be just back in a bit, getting on to with the next speaker. See you there.
Thank you.